Would you still obey God if no one believed you? Would you keep building if everyone around you kept laughing? Would you stay faithful for years, in silence, with no applause, no confirmation, and no signs of rain? This isn't just Noah's story. It's the test of faith every one of us will face in a world that calls trust foolish and obedience unnecessary. So here's the real question. Can you follow God's voice, even when it makes no sense to the world? When obedience doesn't make sense, but you do it anyway. In a world that had never seen rain, God told Noah to build a massive ark, not tomorrow, not once it started raining, but now, while the sky was still clear. And so he did. No explanation, no weather forecast, no crowd to cheer him on, just wood, nails, and a quiet, unwavering faith. For 120 years, Noah obeyed, while the world mocked, while people passed by shaking their heads. He didn't need to understand the whole plan. He just needed to trust the one who gave it. And that is what makes this story more than ancient history. It's a divine blueprint for anyone who's ever been called to something bigger than themselves. Because maybe God has asked you to start building too, even if no one else sees the storm coming. 1. Obedience without explanation. Sometimes, God gives no details, no roadmap, no deadline, just a quiet whisper in your soul. Do this. And then, silence. There are no fireworks, no divine billboard flashing, "You're on the right path." Just a choice, to either trust him or wait for more proof. Noah didn't wait for clarity. He didn't sit down and say, "God, I'll obey once you explain yourself." He didn't bargain. "I'll build this ark, but only if you guarantee it'll rain." He obeyed, immediately, fully, without knowing when, without knowing how, without needing to understand why. And that's where most of us wrestle. We like the idea of faith until it demands something unreasonable, something uncomfortable, something that costs us our image, our comfort, our plans. We want to obey, yes, but we also want control, and the two don't coexist well. Control says, "I need to see it to believe it." Faith says, "I believe it, even if I never see it." God doesn't always owe you an explanation, but he always deserves your trust. You see, real obedience doesn't just start with understanding. It starts with relationship. When you truly know the heart of the one who calls you, you don't need all the facts. You just need his voice. And maybe you've been feeling that voice lately, that quiet stirring, to forgive someone who hasn't apologized, to step into a new season that feels risky, to let go of a place that used to feel safe. It doesn't make sense. Your friends don't get it. Even you don't fully get it. But deep down, you know, this is your ark moment. It's not about what you build. It's about the posture of your heart while you build it. Are you willing to walk in faith when there's no applause? Are you willing to trust God's silence more than the world's noise? Because obedience without explanation isn't weakness. It's one of the purest forms of worship. You're saying, "God, I trust you more than I trust my understanding." Your voice is enough, even when nothing else is clear. But what happens when that obedience draws no attention, no affirmation, no one clapping for you as you quietly keep going? That's where we move into something even deeper. Obedience without validation. Faith that survives the silence. 2. Faith over applause. Noah didn't have an audience. He wasn't live streaming the ark on social media. He wasn't collecting praise from people walking by. In fact, most of the time, they were laughing, mocking, whispering behind his back. pointing at what looked like a foolish old man building something no one asked for. And yet, he kept going. Because Noah wasn't building for approval. He was building out of obedience. There's a quiet kind of strength in that. The kind that doesn't need validation to stay faithful. The kind that keeps working when no one's watching. The kind that keeps praying, sowing, trusting, when nothing looks like it's working. You see, most people don't walk away from faith because of hardship. They walk away because of loneliness, because they expected applause, and all they got was silence. But faith was never meant to be popular. It was never about fitting in or being celebrated. Faith is about alignment, not approval. It's about choosing to believe when belief makes you look crazy. It's about holding on when letting go would be easier. It's about showing up, not for recognition, but because your soul refuses to quit on what God has planted. Maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe you're in a season where obedience feels invisible, where no one sees your quiet sacrifices, where no one claps when you show up again and again and again. But here's the truth. God sees. He sees what you do in secret. He sees your tears behind closed doors. He sees your faithfulness in the ordinary mundane moments. And in a world obsessed with being seen, God honors what's done in the unseen. Because the deeper your obedience goes, the less applause you need. And the more unshakable your faith becomes. Don't trade divine purpose for temporary praise. Don't give up the ark just because no one clapped when you picked up the hammer. You're not building for them. You're building for something eternal. And when the rain comes, the very thing they mocked will be the thing that saves. Let them laugh. Let them question. Let them walk away. You keep building. Because faith doesn't need a crowd. It just needs a calling. 3. Build before the rain. The skies were still blue. The earth was still dry. There was no sign of danger. No clouds, no wind, no reason. And yet, Noah built. Not because he saw the storm, but because he trusted the one who did. This is where faith gets uncomfortable. Because it asks you to move. Before there's a reason to move. To prepare. Before there's a visible threat. To obey. Before it feels necessary. And that's where most people pause. Because building before the rain feels foolish. It feels risky. It feels like stepping out into nothing. But the truth is, faith isn't reactive. It's proactive. Faith doesn't wait for thunder to start moving. Faith hears a whisper and gets to work. Noah didn't wait for confirmation. He didn't ask God, "Can you just give me one raindrop as proof?" He didn't delay until conditions made sense. He just started building, day after day, board after board, nail after nail. Because when God speaks, you don't wait for signs. You become the sign. And maybe God is asking you to do the same. To start something while everything still feels calm. To prepare for a future no one else can see. To step into obedience while the world says, "Why now?" It could be starting a ministry that doesn't have followers yet. It could be setting boundaries that no one understands. It could be investing time, energy, and faith into something that seems invisible, even to you. And people may question you. They may call you overly spiritual. They may say you're being too cautious, too intense, too different. But when the storm comes, and it always does, those who prepared will rise above the waters. Faith before the rain is what separates builders from watchers. It's what separates those who survive from those who scramble. Don't wait for things to get bad before you move in obedience. Don't wait for the skies to turn gray to trust God's direction. Start now. Even if the ground is dry. Even if the skies are clear. Even if nobody else is building. Because when you move before the rain, you're not just avoiding the flood. You're stepping into your calling. 4. Faithfulness in the silence. There's a kind of obedience that happens in the spotlight. And then there's the kind that happens when no one's watching. No audience, no confirmation, no timeline. Just quiet repetition, day in, day out. That's the obedience Noah knew intimately. For 120 years, he built. He didn't get updates from heaven. He didn't hear a daily well done from God. He just kept working. In silence. Noah's story isn't just about surviving a flood. It's about surviving the wait, the grind, the long, invisible middle. And maybe that's where you are right now. You heard God speak. You started well. You obeyed. But now, it's quiet. No open doors, no aha moments. Just more wood, more nails, and more days that feel like they're going nowhere. But don't miss this. Silence doesn't mean absence. Stillness doesn't mean God has stopped moving. Delay doesn't mean denial. Sometimes the greatest work of faith isn't in the bold first step, it's in the 100th step. When you're tired, questioning, and still choosing to keep going. That's what makes faithfulness so powerful. It doesn't rely on momentum. It doesn't need applause. It holds on. Not because it feels good, but because it knows who gave the word. Maybe you're showing up every day to a job that feels unseen. Maybe you're praying for someone who doesn't seem to change. Maybe you're sowing seeds into a dream that hasn't produced fruit. Yet, don't stop. Your consistency is louder than you think. Every act of unseen obedience is building something eternal. And every time you show up without a feeling, you're telling heaven, my faith is not built on how I feel. It's built on who I follow. And that moves the heart of God, because anyone can be faithful for a moment, but few will be faithful through the silence, through the doubt, through the years. But Noah was. And when the time came, when the sky cracked open and the heavens released what had never been seen, he was ready. Not because he saw it coming, but because he never stopped preparing. So the question is, can you stay loyal to what God said, even when he says nothing else? 5. Silence is strength. Noah didn't argue with the mockers. He didn't try to explain himself to every skeptic. He didn't waste time proving his obedience was valid. He just kept building in silence. Because sometimes the loudest thing you can do is say nothing at all. We live in a world that demands explanations. A world where people feel entitled to your process, your timeline, your why. But Noah teaches us something different. You don't have to speak to stand strong. There's power in choosing not to defend yourself. Power in walking away from the noise. Power in letting your life, your consistency, do the talking. Noah didn't need to convince anyone. He didn't start a debate. He didn't host a town meeting to justify his obedience. Why? Because when you know who gave you the assignment, you stop needing permission from those who didn't. Let that settle deep. You don't need to explain your obedience to people who never heard what God whispered to you. They weren't in the room. They didn't hear the call. They didn't carry the weight. So they don't get a vote. Silence is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's restraint. It's the discipline of knowing that some things are too sacred to argue about. Maybe you've been tempted to justify your decisions, to answer every critic, to try and prove your faith is valid. But what if God is inviting you into a different posture? Not one of loud defense, but one of quiet confidence. Because when it's all said and done, the ark didn't need an explanation. The storm proved everything. In the same way, you don't need to force your fruit to appear. The rain will come. And when it does, what you've built in silence will speak louder than anything you could have said. So let them talk. Let them doubt. Let them laugh. You stay grounded. You stay consistent. You stay silent, and let obedience roar through your actions. Because the one who walks with God doesn't need to shout. They just need to keep walking. 6. Your obedience protects others. Noah wasn't just building for himself, he was building for people who didn't understand the assignment. Even in his own household, his obedience wasn't loud. It wasn't glamorous, but it became a shelter for his family when the flood came. And that's something we often forget. Your obedience doesn't just impact your life. It can save someone else's. You may think you're just following God quietly, just trying to stay faithful in your lane. But you have no idea. How many people are being covered by the consistency of your yes? Noah's sons were saved because he didn't give up. His wife was spared because he kept showing up. His legacy survived because he kept hammering, even when it made no sense. You think you're just praying in secret, but you're building shelter for someone's breakthrough. You think you're just walking in obedience with no reward, but you're planting seeds that will grow into protection for generations you may never see. This is what legacy looks like. It's not always seen. It's not always celebrated, but it's always sacred. Some of the most important acts of faith happen in the background when you choose to trust God. Instead of rushing the timeline, when you decide to stay. Instead of escape, when you keep building the ark, even though it hasn't rained yet. Your faithfulness creates safety. It creates space for others to encounter God. Because you refuse to quit. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the real reward of obedience isn't what you receive, but who you rescue. So keep praying for your child, even if they haven't come home yet. Keep serving your church, even when no one says thank you. Keep loving your spouse, even when it feels one-sided. Because faith like Noah's doesn't just survive the storm, it carries others through it. What you're building right now may be the very thing that shelters someone you love from a flood they don't even see coming. Keep going, even if it's heavy, even if it's quiet, even if you feel alone, because your obedience isn't just obedience. It's rescue, it's legacy, it's worship. The quiet strength that carries generations. Noah didn't obey because it made sense. He obeyed because he trusted the one who spoke. He didn't need applause. He didn't need proof. He just needed a word. And that was enough. And maybe that's what God is asking of you too. Not for perfection, not for loudness, but for a quiet, consistent obedience. That doesn't wait to be understood before it begins. Because every moment you choose trust over clarity, faith over comfort, obedience over outcome, you are building something eternal, something the world won't notice until the rain starts falling. And then the ark you built in secret will become the very thing that keeps you and others afloat. So if you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. Start building. Start obeying. Start trusting. Not because it makes sense, but because He is worthy. And one day, when the floodwaters rise and the noise fades, you will look back and see that quiet yes was never small. It was everything. If this message stirred something in you, share it with someone who needs courage to obey. And don't stop here. Watch the next video. Abraham's Journey. Walking by faith, not by sight. It's a reminder that even when we don't know where we're going, God is already there. Subscribe for more teachings that feed your faith and help you walk in obedience. Even when it's hard, even when it's quiet, even when it's unseen. Because the path of obedience is never wasted.